Hey bees of HB, welcome back to HB Tales. Subscribe as we are continuing to our story. The city lights blurred into streaks as Bill Gates' limousine glided through the rainy streets. He had just left a late meeting, one more step in a relentless cycle of philanthropy and progress. Despite the billions he had given away, he often felt he wasn't doing enough. As the car slowed at a red light, his attention was drawn to a figure under a flickering street lamp. A homeless man sat cross-legged on the wet pavement, head bowed, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Tomorrow depends on today." The man wasn't begging or calling out. He just sat there, still as a statue. Something about him struck Bill deeply. He asked the driver to stop and stepped out. The cold night air bit at his face as he approached the man. "Here," Bill said, pulling a crisp $100 bill from his wallet. The man looked up, his piercing grey eyes locking onto Bill's with unsettling intensity. He didn't smile or say thank you. Instead, he spoke softly, his voice like a riddle. "You've changed everything," Bill blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked. But the man stood, his face curling into a smirk. Without another word, he disappeared into the shadows of a nearby alley. That night, Bill couldn't sleep. The man's words echoed in his mind. Changed everything. But how? And why did the man's expression feel more like a warning than gratitude? The days that followed were anything but ordinary. Bill's life, usually so orderly and predictable, started unraveling. His carefully planned schedule began to fall apart, with mysterious events creeping into his calendar. A meeting with an unknown name appeared, titled Reflection. Emails began arriving with cryptic messages like, "The weight of the world rests on forgotten shoulders." At first, Bill assumed it was some sort of prank or mistake. But then came the sightings. He began seeing the man from the street lamp on the corner outside his office, reflected in the glass of his limousine. Even on a television broadcast, during a news segment. Always, the man was there, always watching. Then, late one evening, a package arrived at Bill's home. It was unmarked, left on the doorstep of his heavily secured mansion. Inside was a battered notebook and a single note. "Read before it's too late." Opening the notebook, Bill found pages filled with detailed accounts of his life. There were childhood memories, private conversations, and pivotal decisions he had made, some so obscure even he had forgotten them. The handwriting shifted on the later pages, becoming frantic and uneven. These entries were dated in the future. One sentence stopped him cold. December 15th, the fall of Gates. A legacy dismantled. Bill stared at the date. It was only 3 days away. Determined to understand the meaning of the notebook, Bill hired a team of private investigators to find the mysterious man. They combed through surveillance footage, traced the package's origin, and analyzed the notebook, but the leads were scarce. One clue stood out. A crumpled newspaper clipping about a brilliant inventor named Jacob Steele, who had disappeared years ago. Steele had once been a promising figure in the tech world but had fallen into obscurity after a series of business failures. Bill dug deeper into Steele's past. The man had been hailed as a visionary, but his inventions had been overshadowed by larger corporations, including Microsoft. Bill felt a pang of guilt. Many people had been overlooked or displaced as his empire grew. His thoughts were interrupted by a call from his lead investigator. They had traced the man to an abandoned shelter on the outskirts of the city. Against his advisor's warnings, Bill decided to confront him alone. The shelter was a crumbling relic, its walls covered in graffiti and its windows shattered. Bill stepped inside, the dim light of his flashlight illuminating the debris-strewn floor. The air was thick with mildew and dust, but the atmosphere felt heavier, almost oppressive. A voice echoed from the darkness. "You shouldn't have come." Bill spun around, his flashlight catching the familiar figure of the man. He was sitting on an overturned crate, his gray eyes glowing in the dim light. "Who are you?" Bill demanded. "Why are you doing this?" The man smirked. "I told you, you changed everything." "Enough with the riddles," Bill snapped, stepping closer. "If you need help, I'll help you. If this is about money, you can have it. Just tell me what you want." The man chuckled darkly. "It's not about what I want. It's about what the world needs." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small divisor prototype of some kind. "This was my life's work, a revolutionary technology that could have changed the world. But it never saw the light of day. I lost everything while you climbed higher and higher." Bill hesitated. "You're Jacob Steele." The man's smirk faded. "I was. Now, I'm nothing, a ghost. But you gave me something unexpected. That $100 wasn't just money, it was a crack in the facade. It reminded me that even the mighty can fall." The air seemed to thicken as Steele stood, his presence growing larger, more menacing. "Do you know what it's like to be invisible, Gates? To scream into the void and hear nothing but silence? You've spent your life building empires, but at what cost?" Bill swallowed hard. "If I've wronged you, I'm sorry, but I've spent years trying to make amends, to give back." Steele's laugh was cold. "You think money fixes everything? Some wounds can't be healed with donations or grants. Some damage is irreversible." The shelter began to shudder, as if the weight of their conversation was tearing it apart. Steele's form flickered, his features distorting like a glitch in a computer program. "You're not real," Bill whispered, stepping back. This isn't real. I am as real as the consequences of your choices," Steele said, his voice echoing like 1,000 whispers. "But don't worry, Gates. This isn't the end. It's the beginning." With a blinding flash, the world around Bill collapsed into darkness. When Bill awoke, he was lying on a cold, hard sidewalk. The towering skyscrapers of his empire were gone, replaced by the modest buildings of an unfamiliar city block. He sat up, clutching a crumpled $100 bill in his hand. Passersby ignored him, their eyes sliding past him as if he were invisible. Confused and disoriented, Bill tried to speak, but no one seemed to recognize him. He was just another face in the crowd. Looking down at the $100 bill, he noticed a message scrawled in red ink. "True wealth is not in what you take, but in what you give." Bill sat under a flickering street lamp, the weight of the message sinking in. He realized he had been given a second chance, not to reclaim his fortune, but to truly understand the value of lifting others up. And for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of hope.